The cabin of the Boeing 737 was a tomb of recycled air and low-frequency hums. Naomi Carter leaned her forehead against the cold window, staring into the black void over the Atlantic coast. Beneath her eyes were dark crescents, the permanent bruises of a woman who had worked double shifts in a Chicago ICU for 12 long years. In her lap, her fingers traced the embossed gold foil of a birthday card. To the world's best mother. It was 3 months late. She hadn't mailed it because every time she picked up the pen, a strange, cold intuition paralyzed her hand. For 12 years, I believed every word they said, Naomi's voiceover whispers, thick with a grief she hasn't yet named. I thought my mother was the queen of Savannah. I thought the thousands of dollars I wired every month, the sacrifices I made while skipping meals and living in a studio apartment, were building her a palace of comfort. I thought she was safe. I thought she was loved. The screen cuts rapidly. Naomi in blue scrubs, running to a code blue. Naomi at a Western Union kiosk, sliding a stack of hundreds under the glass. Naomi's uncle Reggie on a grainy FaceTime call, smiling broadly with a gold tooth glinting. Don't you worry 'bout a thing, baby girl. Your mama is sleeping like a baby. We got the best groceries in the house. You just keep focused on that career. But then, the screen flashes to the reality Naomi couldn't see. Evelyn Carter, once the most sought-after seamstress in Georgia, sitting in a kitchen shrouded in cobwebs. The refrigerator is open, its shelves empty save for a single shriveled lemon. The heat is off. The Savannah humidity has turned to a biting damp, and Evelyn is wearing a tattered wool coat and winter gloves inside her own living room. Naomi lands at 6 a.m. The Savannah air is thick with the scent of salt marsh and blooming jasmine. A smell that usually meant home, but today it felt like a warning. She doesn't call Reggie for a ride. She hires a car and drives through the neighborhood of her youth. The gentrification is a physical blow. Glass and steel condos loom over the historic Black district like vultures. But when she turns onto her grandfather's street, her heart stops. The Peach House, once the pride of the block, looks like a corpse. The grass is waist-high and yellow. Orange animal control notices are taped to the peeling front door. Naomi walks up the creaking steps, her pulse thundering in her ears. She rounds the corner to the back porch. There, sitting in a rusted metal chair, is a ghost. Evelyn is half the size Naomi remembers. Her silver hair is matted, her skin sallow. She is staring at a dead garden, her gloved hands folded in her lap. Ma? Naomi whispers. The elderly woman doesn't turn. She doesn't blink. Ma, it's Naomi. I'm home. Evelyn slowly turns her head. Her eyes are clouded, vacant. She looks at her only daughter, the woman who sent $250,000 home over a decade, and says in a voice like dry leaves, I'm sorry, miss. I don't have any money for the dress. They took the sewing machine yesterday. Naomi freezes. The birthday card falls from her hand into the dirt. The horror isn't just that her mother is starving. It's that the woman she loved is gone, replaced by a shell of trauma, while the people Naomi trusted were getting fat off her labor. The front door groaned as Naomi pushed it open. She expected the smell of starch and peppermint, the sense of her childhood home. Instead, the stench of mildew, stagnant air, and rot hit her like a physical wall. Who's in here? A sharp, nasal voice rang out from the upstairs landing. A woman Naomi didn't recognize. Sharon walked down the stairs wearing one of Evelyn's vintage silk robes. She held a cigarette in one hand and a smartphone in the other. She looked at Naomi's designer luggage and sighed with practiced boredom. Well, Sharon said, blowing smoke toward the ceiling. Somebody finally decided to come back from the north. I figured you'd wait until the funeral to show your face. Who are you? Naomi's voice was low, vibrating with a nurse's authoritative steel. And why is my mother sitting in the cold while you're wearing her clothes? Quote. Before Sharon could answer, the back door swung open. Uncle Reggie walked in, carrying a box of takeout. He froze when he saw Naomi. For a split second, pure terror flashed across his face, quickly replaced by a mask of southern charm. Naomi. Sugar. He dropped the food and moved for a hug. Why didn't you tell us you were coming? We would have had a feast ready. Quote. Naomi stepped back, her eyes darting to the kitchen. The cabinets were hanging off their hinges. She yanked one open. Empty. She opened the pantry. A single box of saltine crackers and a jar of water. I sent $1,500 2 weeks ago for emergency roof repairs and a medical specialist, Naomi said, her voice trembling. Where is the money, Reggie? Why is the power disconnected? Why is there a shut-off notice for the water on the counter? Quote. Reggie sighed, leaning against the counter as if he were the victim. Now, Naomi, don't go getting hysterical. You know how your mama is. She's lost her mind, baby. She hides the food. She pours the water out. We've been exhausted trying to keep up with her. Sharon here is a certified caregiver. I hired her out of my own pocket to help. Out of your pocket? Naomi screamed. I've sent you the equivalent of a house's value over 12 years. This is my grandfather's legacy. Quote. She pushed past them, running to her mother's old sewing room. This was the sanctuary where Evelyn had crafted wedding gowns for the wealthiest families in the South. Now, the room was a storage locker for junk. The industrial sewing machine was gone. The bolts of silk were replaced by Reggie's old weightlifting equipment and Sharon's shoe collection. In the corner, Naomi found a small shoebox under a pile of rags. She opened it. Inside were every single birthday card, Christmas card, and, just because, note Naomi had ever sent. They were unopened. The seals were intact. Her mother hadn't even been allowed to read her daughter's love. That night, Naomi didn't go to a hotel. She cleaned a small corner of the floor in her mother's room, wrapped Evelyn in a clean blanket she found in her trunk, and held her. I'm so sorry, Ma, she sobbed into her mother's thin hair. I thought the money was enough. I thought I was doing the right thing. Evelyn's hand, still in that winter glove, reached up and feebly patted Naomi's cheek. She didn't say a name. She just whispered, don't let them take the house. Little girl, the ghosts have nowhere else to go. The next morning, the cavalry arrived in the form of a rusted pickup truck. Marcus Reed, Naomi's childhood best friend, stepped out. He was broader now, his face lined with the honest work of a contractor. But his eyes were the same, kind and observant. He didn't say, I told you so, even though he'd sent that Facebook message that brought her home. He just looked at the sagging porch and then at Naomi. I've been trying to get in here for 3 years. Nay, Marcus said quietly. Reggie told the whole neighborhood you'd gone, uppity, and told him to put your mama in a home. He told us you forbade any of us from visiting. He made you the villain so he could be the martyr. The depth of the deception made Naomi dizzy. He isolated her. He made her a prisoner in her own history. With Marcus's help, Naomi bypassed Reggie's protests and took Evelyn to a private clinic. The results were a litany of neglect, severe malnutrition, chronic dehydration. Her dementia wasn't Alzheimer's. It was a cognitive fog brought on by untreated diabetes and profound depression. She isn't dying of old age, the doctor told Naomi, looking over the charts. She's dying of loneliness and lack of basic care. If she'd stayed in that house another month, her kidneys would have failed. This wasn't an accident, Naomi. This was an erasure. While Marcus began fixing the water heater and the holes in the roof for free, Naomi met with attorney Denise Holloway. Denise was a legend in Savannah. A woman who wore Chanel suits and spoke with the fire of a Sunday preacher. Remittance fraud is a quiet epidemic, Denise said. Flipping through the bank records Naomi had managed to claw away from Reggie's desk. He didn't just spend the cash. Naomi, look at this. She slid a document across the table. It was a power of attorney form. It bore Evelyn's signature, but the E was shaky, looped in a way Evelyn never wrote. He's trying to sell the property to Peachtree Development, Denise explained. They're the ones building those luxury condos nearby. They offered him a $500,000 kickback under the table to get your mother out. He was waiting for her to pass away, or to be declared incompetent so he could sign the deed over. The realization hit Naomi like a physical blow. The house wasn't just a building. It was the last piece of black-owned land on a block that was being swallowed by corporate greed. Her mother wasn't just a burden to Reggie. She was a hurdle to a payday. Naomi went back to the house that afternoon. Her nurse's heart replaced by a warrior's spirit. She found Sharon in the kitchen, frying bacon she had bought with Naomi's last wire transfer. Pack your bags, Naomi said, her voice like ice. Excuse me? Sharon laughed, waving a spatula. Reggie says, quote, I don't give a damn what Reggie says. This is my mother's house. I have the medical reports. I have the photos of the neglect. And I have a sheriff's deputy on his way to escort you off this property for elder abuse. You have 10 minutes. Or you can explain to the police why you're wearing my mother's jewelry. Sharon's face went pale. For the first time, the entitlement vanished. As she scurried upstairs to grab her things, Naomi looked out the window and saw Marcus on a ladder, nailing new shingles to the roof. The repair was beginning, but the war for her mother's soul had just started. The courtroom in downtown Savannah was humid, the overhead fans churning the heavy air without cooling it. Reggie sat at the defense table, looking polished in a navy suit, playing the role of the grieving, overworked relative. Your Honor, Reggie's lawyer argued, his voice smooth as honey. Mr. Carter is a pillar of the church. He took in his sister when her own daughter abandoned her for the bright lights of Chicago. Any neglect was simply the result of a man doing his best with no resources and a sister who was losing her grip on reality. Naomi stood up. She didn't wait for her cue. She walked to the witness stand, clutching a stack of Western Union receipts. 12 years of paper trails. I didn't abandon her, Naomi said, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. I was the engine that kept this family running. I worked 16-hour shifts in an ICU so my mother could have the best. My uncle didn't use this money for her. He used it for a down payment on a boat. He used it to fund a lifestyle for a woman who isn't even family. While he was doing his best, my mother was wearing winter gloves in the house because she was afraid to turn on the heat he hadn't paid for. Attorney Denise Holloway then played the ace. She produced a recording Marcus had captured on his phone. Reggie talking to a developer in the driveway, bragging about how he'd have the old lady in a state facility by Christmas so they could break ground on the condos. The gallery, filled with neighbors who had once judged Naomi, gasped. The tide was turning. Public shame, once aimed at the successful daughter who forgot her roots, was now a spotlight burning directly on Reggie. But the most powerful moment wasn't the legal victory. It was what happened back at the house a week later. Marcus had finished the sewing room. He'd tracked down the industrial machine Reggie had pawned and bought it back. He'd painted the walls a soft, calming peach. Naomi led Evelyn into the room. Her mother was stronger now, her eyes brighter after a month of proper meals and companionship. Evelyn walked to the table and ran her fingers over the cold metal of the sewing machine. She stopped at a drawer and pulled out a bundle of half-finished fabric. It was a small, white dress with intricate lace. I was making this for your daughter, Evelyn whispered. It was the first full sentence she'd spoken in weeks. I kept waiting for you to come home and tell me you were pregnant. I wanted her to have something handmade from her grandmother. Naomi broke down. She fell to her knees and buried her face in her mother's lap. The guilt she'd carried, the idea that she'd wasted 12 years thinking money was a substitute for presence, came out in ragged sobs. I'm here now, Ma, Naomi cried. I'm not going back. I'm never leaving you again. Evelyn didn't just forgive her. She began to heal her. She picked up a pair of scissors. The tremor in her hand was still there. But as she touched the fabric, her muscle memory took over. The crazy woman the neighborhood had whispered about was gone. The artist was returning. 6 months later, the peach house didn't just look alive. It glowed. The yard was no longer a jungle. It was a riot of hydrangeas and snapdragons. The front porch had been reinforced, and 2 rocking chairs sat side by side, overlooking the street where children now played safely. Reggie was gone. Having fled the state to avoid the criminal charges Denise Holloway was pressing for inheritance fraud, Sharon had disappeared into the shadows of the city, leaving behind the silk robes she never earned. But the neighborhood had changed in a different way. Inspired by Naomi's fight, other legacy families began to board up their windows and fix their fences, realizing that their history was worth more than a developer's check. It was the day of the Savannah Cultural Festival. Usually, this was a day for the new Savannah, the boutiques and the galleries. But Naomi had organized something different. In the center of the town square, a small stage was set up. 12 years ago, I thought love was a wire transfer, Naomi said into the microphone. Looking out at the crowd, I thought duty was a paycheck. I was wrong. Duty is presence. Love is being the one to hold the light when the world goes dark. She turned and gestured to the curtain. Evelyn Carter stepped out. She was wearing a dress of her own design, a vibrant, emerald silk that shimmered like the marsh at sunset. Behind her, 3 young girls from the neighborhood followed, wearing handmade graduation dresses Evelyn had spent the last 3 months sewing. The applause was deafening. The woman they thought was lost was leading a parade of the future. The story ends back at the house. Naomi is putting up a new sign over the front gate. It's carved in dark wood, elegant and bold. Evelyn's house, a center for tradition and care. The sewing room was now a classroom where Evelyn taught young women the dying art of couture, while a wing of the house served as a respite for elderly neighbors who had no family to watch over them. Naomi had traded her Chicago ICU shifts for a role as a community health advocate, ensuring no other mother in Savannah would ever starve in silence again. Marcus walked up the drive, carrying a tray of lemonade. He caught Naomi's eye and smiled, a look that promised a future they were building together. Slowly and with intention, Naomi climbed the steps and sat next to her mother on the porch. The sun was setting, casting long, golden shadows across the street. You okay, Ma? Quote. Evelyn leaned her head on Naomi's shoulder. She smelled of starch and peppermint again. I'm more than okay, baby, Evelyn said, her voice strong and clear. I'm home. The camera pans out, showing the peach house standing tall and bright, a beacon of gold in a world that tried to turn it gray. Voiceover. I spent years sending money home, when what my mother really needed was for someone to come home.